The skin of the cell, the primary barrier of the cell, and the sac that holds in all its contents. The cell membrane is a really complex and crucial part of the cell. So, what is the cell membrane and how does it work? Hi, my name is Mauricio and you're watching Edutainment. Hey, welcome to Edutainment. In this video we'll be talking about cell membranes. So first of all, what is a cell membrane? Well, the cell membrane is the layer that protects the interior of the cell from the exterior world, preventing it from spilling out and spreading, separating its components through chemical and water potential. Without the cell membrane, cells and life would not possibly exist, as this thin layer was encapsulated of necessary chemicals and organic molecules that by being contained in a small space were able to react with each other chemically to form replicators, and further in the journey, life itself. But more on that on the history of cells part 2 that is going to be linked in this video as soon as we release it. Okay, so you might be wondering, what is this awesome barrier and container of cells made of? The short answer is phospholipids, bilayer, and proteins for the most part. I know what you might be thinking. What in the world is a phospholipid bilayer? Sounds complex, doesn't it? Well, it is not as confusing as you might think. A phospholipid consists of a phosphate group and two fatty acids, one being saturated and one being unsaturated. These two fatty acids are connected to a glycerol head, which is also attached to a phosphate group, creating a phospholipid. Now, this phospholipid has a hydrophobic, that being water-fearing, part, and a hydrophilic or water-loving part. The hydrophobic part are the fatty acids, and the hydrophilic part are both the glycerol and the phosphate group. If it sounds a little bit hard to remember, try to put it like this. The lipids, or fatty acids, are similar to cooking oil as they're also fatty acids, and you've probably seen that oil and water never mix, no matter how hard you try. So there you have it. Remember that and you'll be fine. These characteristics of phospholipids, combined with the fact that both the inside of the cell and the outside contain water, is what makes the bilayer, because the phosphate group, that is water-loving, forces the water-fearing fatty acids inside, as the phospholipids go out because they are attracted to water. Hence, the bilayer is formed. As these phospholipids are not broken down by water, it creates an insulating barrier between the inside and the outside of the cell. But as this layer lets the phospholipids move freely around the membranes, as long as they are attached to one another, it lets small molecules like oxygen and carbon dioxide to pass freely and without the need of ATP, or channel proteins. This happens in a process called diffusion. Bigger molecules can't diffuse to the cell because the space between phospholipids is really small, and they just can't pass through there, just like an elephant can't go in a fridge. Okay, that was a bad joke, but it illustrates the point. The transport of bigger molecules is where proteins have a big role on the cell membrane. There are two different main kinds of proteins in the membrane. The integral proteins, which are embedded in the whole phospholipid layer and are really hard to take off, and the peripheral proteins, which are attached outside the membrane and are actually easy to take off. In some cases they actually separate by themselves. There is a third but very rare type of protein, which is the lipid-bound protein, and they are found in the middle of the phospholipid bilayer. The integral proteins themselves divide into two types, the carrier proteins and the channel proteins. The carrier proteins require ATP to function in some cases, and with this, the cell can control the pumping of specific chemicals and molecules in and out of the cell against the concentration gradient. and they sort of look like a shell that opens from both sides. Differently, the channel proteins have a channel in the middle, letting the chemicals flow in and out of the cell according to the concentration gradient. This channel proteins doesn't require any ATP at all to function. Both carrier and channel proteins have a certain shape and size that lets only certain chemicals and molecules to pass through. Now, the peripheral proteins are those proteins found in the outside of the membrane, found both inside and outside of the cell. These are usually temporary proteins such as hormones that attach to the cell membrane, perform a function, and then leave. There is also an extra addition to both the integral and peripheral proteins, that being the glycoproteins. These proteins can be attached to both kinds of proteins, and its shape is that of a chain, as it really is a chain of sugars attached to these, and whose purpose is merely for signaling, communication, and recognition between cells. As a bonus fact, the cell membrane also contains cholesterol, this to prevent cells from freezing in really cold temperatures by keeping the cell membrane fluid, but not too fluid or too stiff. So pretty much cholesterol can control the fluidity of the cell membrane. Now, as far as the functions of the cell membrane goes, it is pretty much a barrier between the inside and outside world that selectively permeates and pumps chemicals and molecules in and out to maintain homeostasis in the cell, but it also serves as an agent to receive and send signals in between cells, or even participates in some metabolic processes, as some of the proteins attached to the membrane do certain steps in these. And that is pretty much as far as functions go. Phospholipid membranes are also found throughout all the inside of the cell, in the organelles, which are membrane bound in an eukaryote, the nucleus and vacuoles, lysosomes and mitochondria. They pretty much contain and store necessary components in sacs of phospholipids and proteins. Well, we've reached the end of the video about the cell membrane. I really hope you enjoyed, and don't forget to rate, comment and subscribe for more awesome videos. See you soon. Hey, like the videos? Don't forget to rate, comment and subscribe. See you next time in entertainment.
Yeah!